Our next speaker is Dr. Sunny Kleinow. He's Senior Enterprise Solution Architect at Comforte. Her talk today is on data protection, identifying risks, implementing methodologies, and unlocking value in business analytics. A bit about Dr. Kleinow. She is a 25-year veteran in the cybersecurity space. She got her start as a cryptographer in the U.S. Army. Since that time, she has worked extensively in identity and access management, data center operations, cloud security, and data security. She holds a master's degree in mathematics, mechanical engineering, and computer science, as well as her doctorate in data assurance. Please help me welcome her to the stage.
Now, I'm going to take you through a session on data protection, identifying risks, implementing some methodologies, and unlocking value in business. The importance of data protection is reflected in the unprecedented growth of the amount of data being created and stored today. To meet this trend, privacy regulations are finally being passed and enforced, as organizations have also been exposed to increased threats of data breaches and cyber attacks. Therefore, it's crucial for organizations to proactively protect their data and continuously update their proactive measures. The key principle of data protection is safeguarding data from bad actors and adverse circumstances. However, data protection technologies have also evolved to unlock new business value with otherwise dormant copies of data for reporting, test dev enablement, and much more. We will discuss how data protection methodologies like encryption and tokenization can help companies comply with regulations, avoid costly fines, and play a key role in unlocking the value of business analytics. Around 2.5 quintillion bytes worth of data are generated each day, and there are currently over 44 zettabytes of data in the entire digital universe. More than 70% of the world's data is user-generated. If you look at the investments in big data cost savings and regulations, these have quadrupled since 2019. The importance of data protection is really reflected in the unprecedented growth of data that's being created and stored. I'm going to take you through identifying the risks that data protection can solve, the implementation methodologies that we employ at Comforte, and unlocking the value in business analytics. If you look at safeguarding your data, we've been doing this for quite some time, building moats around our IT infrastructure. So we have perimeter security, network security, endpoint security, application security, but we haven't been doing a lot around data security. The data is not protected. It generally sits there in the clear. And in today's world, it's not if you get breached, it's when you get breached. So a new method of protecting data and protecting our infrastructure is needed. Traditional IT security isn't enough. It's typically piecemeal. We have data at rest encryption, column or file level encryption, transport encryption, application access rules, firewall. We have endpoints, DLP. The gaps are regularly exploited because as we go from one platform to the other, you have to encrypt and unencrypt. And it's normally the clear and accessible data that's the problem. These gaps leave they leave open exploits for bad actors to come in and get a hold of the data. So how do we secure that data, but leave it available enough for analysis and for companies to gain insight as to how their data needs to be used? Can you balance the two? And then if you look at today's data, today's applications, it's comprised of things like databases, files, data business services, middleware that links data repositories, user access granted by access controls. The traditional defense strategies, including perimeter controls, the file encryption, database encryption, it's just not enough. The problem is they protect data in discrete states at rest and motion, not all at once, and not typically in a holistic manner. So if you look at this, as they hop across the infrastructure, this is exactly how malware steals data, often from memory scraping in the app and exploiting it to an external botnet, from data access layers with confidential theft or an injection attack in the database or vulnerability. Similarly, DBAs often have too much access to data. And the issue becomes governance and control over sensitive data. Removing and tokenizing the data avoids point-to-point protection gap management. And then the question becomes, how can this be done securely, integrated quickly, scaled, reliable, and managed without complexity in order to avoid impeding agility? And this just gets more complex as you move to the cloud and add microservices. With Comforte, we provide end-to-end protection from the very time that the data is captured all the way through motion and rest and in use. Then also, in addition to traditional enterprise data protection needs, we need to meet the growing data storage shifts. Privacy regulations are finally being passed and enforced as organizations have been exposed to increasing threats of data breaches and cyber attacks. New privacy bills are being enacted every year, and there's getting momentum for a statewide privacy bill. If you look at it, in the past year, there's been 5 privacy bills signed into law, with several more coming in the next few years. If you look at it on top of HIPAA, NACHA, PCI, GDPR, SHREMS 2, privacy regulations are coming. And if we don't want to have 52 different privacy regulations for all the different states, we need a cohesive and comprehensive privacy bill for all of the United States. You can actually find this privacy bill tracker. I have a URL for you, and you can see what all privacy bills are going into effect, what they're signed into effect, the obligations, and when they're going to start assessing fines. So how do you mitigate these risks and start the journey towards a data protection platform? So we know this can seem like a really lonely climb. How do you get there? So with Comforte, we have our data security platform, from providing discovery and classification, being able to find data, even if you don't know where it's at, and classify that data, inventory that data, building a repository of where your data comes from, how your user is made up, providing policies around how people access the data, what they can view, how they can view it, and then putting protection around that data, integrating with the applications in a seamless, easy to integrate manner, and then deploying that without a lot of complication. We provide end-to-end tokenization and encryption. We protect mostly structured data, but we also protect semi-structured data inside files, application databases, data lakes. So when I say semi-structured data, if you have a form on a help desk application, and say Sunny Kleinow calls in to an insurance company and I'm upset about my policy, the help desk person might take some information like my date of birth, my policy number, and what I'm upset about. Well, my date of birth and my policy number might be PII information. Our product can actually automatically detect that PII information, encrypt it or tokenize it, but leave the sentiment that the help desk person put in that free-form text. So the organization understands that I'm upset and what I'm upset about, but it protects my PII information so they can comply with regulatory needs. We provide granular control as well as audit of everything that happens. So we can control this down to the field level, as well as how they access the information. So it might be social security number, who has access to that social security number, and how they view it. someone might be able to view the whole social security number, whereas like a DBA might only need to see the last 4 digits of the social security number, or someone in the help desk might only need to view the last 4 digits of the social security number, where a fraud analyst would need to view the whole social security number. We provide continuous data protection at rest, in motion, as well as in use. And we provide a modern platform with transparent integration. So we are natively built for the cloud. We use Kubernetes for scalability, high availability, elasticity. And then our integrations, we don't use agents, we don't use an API, we use what's called transparent interceptors. And it makes this 10 times faster to deploy versus traditional API approaches. This is what all of our customers love about us, is that we're not having to deploy code, we're not having to change applications in order to integrate. It's a lightweight integration, and we capture the data at the soonest point in the data flow. So if it was a web application and people were entering data into the web application, we would capture the information upon entry into the web app, tokenize it or encrypt it, and then encrypt it all the way through the business process into use. So captured at the web application, encrypt it or tokenize it even before it's written to the database, and then keep it encrypted or tokenized as people are using it, and only reveal the level of information that that particular person needs and is authorized for. So we maintain security. We can protect data in all kinds of different areas, from data science applications, data engineering services, cloud and SaaS applications, traditional applications. We have transparent interceptors for most applications that are out there. It just depends on how we need to access them, the approach that we take. We're not the first ones to do a data security platform solution. The problem is first generation solutions were really too complex. Traditional end-to-end data security projects were just taking too long, and they had limited adoption. So it was taking months and years to deploy projects, because you were having to integrate per application and rewrite applications using an API. So it was a very code-intensive integration, and they had complex infrastructure to manage. Some applications couldn't be changed, leaving gaps in their overall data security policy. Complicated encryption and key management processes. Some vendors ship their keys along with their agents, which makes their attack surface bigger. With Comforte, we don't need key management. We can use an HSM, but we don't require an HSM. Competitors had invasive changes to data models. When you talk about putting an agent on a database, it typically requires a schema change. It requires patching that agent. It requires patching the database. You start getting into complex management of those agents and complex management of the database schemas. And then they were incompatible with modern agility demands and change. So they were misaligned with the cloud first enterprise strategy. So if they support cloud, they have basically done a workaround. They're not cloud native. Their infrastructure doesn't run on Kubernetes. They might run on a VM infrastructure, but they don't have all of the flexibility, adaptability, and elasticity running on Kubernetes provides you like our infrastructure does. So we actually created a new transparent and modern approach. So like I talked about before, protecting data elements from capture and keeping it protected end to end. So data stays protected at rest, in motion, and in use in applications, as well as in analytics. So if data is breached, it's a non-event. The only thing that bad actor has gotten is nonsensical data that's abstracted from the real data. Or in analytics, the data has been de-risked so that analysts can work and use that data, and it doesn't matter who's viewing it because the data's already been de-risked. We have data security as a code for modern IT delivery. It's integrated with DevOps. We have Kubernetes and VM for automation. We have a centralized and isolated secrets management for tokenization. This is a differentiator. We have competitors that will say they can do this, but they can't do it with the performance and scale that we can. This allows us to keep our secrets isolated and contained and have a smaller attack surface. We have stateless format preserving tokenization and encryption. And I talked about the fact that we have no key management, which makes managing this much simpler. We have transparent integration with data flows and applications. Again, no APIs, no agents. We instrument data security versus coding it with APIs. And this makes us 10 times faster to deploy versus the first generation platforms. And this reduces the risk of not having a successful deployment because we can actually get it integrated and deployed very quickly. If you look at the data analytics market and how this is impacted, the United States actually has a 51% market share in big data and analytics solutions. And if you look at the global market, the big data and analytics market is worth $274 billion. So big data and analytics is big business. So being able to use your enterprise data in order to get ahead of the competition is critical for businesses today. And you can only do that if you can de-risk the data and allow users to access data and take the risk away from it. So making sure sensitive data is taken out and the copies that people are using is de-risked. If you look at some example customers that we have that have gotten faster deployment with our transparent approach, we have a Fortune 250 financial platform, Fortune 250 customer that has a financial platform that handles 300 million customers. They were looking to do this with a competitor of ours, and they were estimating 32 weeks or more having to do this with multiple teams spanning dev, QA, and operations. And it just wasn't feasible for them to do it. We came in and we were able to do it in less than 4 weeks to learn, configure, and adapt to their needs. So it was a big save for them and a big win to be able to deploy that quickly and get their applications protected. We had another customer that had a COTS, or common off-the-shelf software enterprise platform, that a competitor wasn't able to do it because with their API-based approach, they weren't able to change the code of the COTS application. So we were able to do it in less than 2 weeks. And then we had a cloud AI workflow application using machine intelligence, and a competitor wasn't able to do it because they couldn't integrate with the data science models as they changed hourly. And with an API-based coding approach, you just can't code that fast. So we were able to do it in less than 2 days because the way we instrument the integration. So this is just some savings our customers have seen from doing it with a transparent approach versus an API coding approach. How do we de-risk the data? So we secure that sensitive data at capture. So we're capturing John Smith and all the details about John Smith. We intercept that data and we secure it, and we take it to tokenized data, and it's format preserving tokenization or format preserving encryption. So the data looks like real data. The social security looks like real social security number. The date of birth looks like a real date of birth. And so you can actually do analytics on this information because it looks like real information. The analytics people aren't going to know that it's not real information. You can also give granular access to live data. So depending on the role you're in, you might need some level of detokenized information. If you're a DBA, you don't need a lot of the information detokenized. You might just need to know the last four of a date of birth and the first name to just validate you've got information correct. But as a fraud analyst, you need about 90% of it in the clear so that you can do your job. So based on role, you can choose who has access to the data and how much of that field they see and how they see it. So as a recap, we talked about identifying the risk, so preventing intrusions from becoming data breaches, making the data useless to an attacker, preventing internal threats or mistakes from becoming data leaks, from users having the wrong level of access to the data, simplifying regulatory compliance, having an event severity dramatically reduced because they're getting data that's not real data. Regulatory scope can be reduced because if I am tokenizing like a credit card number, that takes that information out of scope for PCI. Implementation methodologies, I talked about the platform from Comforte and how we implement a data protection platform. And then unlocking the value in business analytics, how to de-risk the data and adapt to changing BI models. So you can find out more about our solution. Here's my contact information. And we do have offices across the globe. We have an office in New York. Our headquarters is in Wiesbaden. We have an office in Singapore and an office in Sydney. I'd like to thank you for your time and your attention, and have a great day.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Kleinow. How are you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Kyla.
Okay, good. I know we have a couple of your Comforte teammates here, Brett Bicker and Samuel Smalling. I've got quite a few questions here, so I will get going. How does my organization begin to evaluate the level of data protection needed?
Sure. So essentially, there's two aspects to it. There's the known sensitive data that the organization is already aware of, and then there's the unknown sensitive data. And this can be extensive, and it can be constantly changing. So we have the capability to employ automated data discovery and classification, which gives you the ability to actually find the sensitive data that may be subject to various data privacy regulations or may, apply to, various security initiatives within the organization that they're targeting. And so this allows you to classify that data, identify all the locations of it, and then begin to build policies and strategy around that, the locations of that data, and begin to instrument those data flows for the purposes of data protection.
Perfect. Samuel, anything to add to that? Great. I've got another question here. So how does my organization determine which protection technologies are most compatible or advantageous in general or specific tools?
Read the first part of that again?
How does my organization determine which protection technologies are most compatible or advantageous?
Well, we can establish that through some initial consultation. So basically, we employ a very broad-based strategy, basically a two-part strategy that enables virtually any use case to be protected and the data flows around it. So there's always, an API-driven approach that can be taken, very rich set of APIs that can be utilized in many of the common programming languages today, in order to instrument an application where you do have control over the source code. And of course, you would expect that. But the other half of our strategy is based primarily on what we call transparent interception. And this gives you the ability to address a wide variety of applications without needing to make code changes. So whether it's a cloud-based technology or an on-prem technology or a hybrid data flow that's running across a hybrid cloud, irrespective of that, we can utilize these different transparent technologies to address the specific nuances of those different technologies in the data flow.
Great. Thank you. Can my organization adopt data protection if we don't know where the sensitive data is?
Yeah, again, sort of the idea of needing to utilize a tool that can help you find that data. So, of course, there's always going to be those repositories and data flows and applications where there is sensitive data, but and many organizations pride themselves on maintaining knowledge of where that data is. But what always surprises organizations that we work with is how many places we're able to find sensitive data that they were unaware. And this is because it's such a dynamically changing environment. You've got data engineers building ETL pipelines, data pipelines for various purposes, authorized users, in various applications who are dumping data, exporting data out to various locations. And this can result in copies of data popping up and appearing in various places in the organization without knowledge of the governance teams or the data management teams. And so being able to have a solution that doesn't just take a snapshot of your where your data is at a given point in time, but actually monitors and continuously scans for new sensitive data is really key. And that's what our solution enables organizations to do.
Great. What can be used as a metric to gauge whether certain data privacy laws affect our organization?
Sure, Sam, you want to?
Yeah, so I think it's a really great question, and can probably be answered in different facets. But I think the important key takeaways to consider, data privacy regulation. First and foremost, sort of stemming from the last question, do you have any sensitive data in your organization? That's going to be first and foremost of whether or not you need to understand if that's something that you need to abide by. Stemming from that, what do you plan to do with the sensitive data? Are your initiatives with data from an organizational level revolving around the need to understand customer behavior? If so, we sort of saw how Dr. Kleinow highlighted ways that you can analyze that data with still staying compliant by having some sort of token and just taking the pieces of the sensitive information that's needed to just run the analysis. And then, also too, data privacy regulation is sort of variant across various international territories. We've seen various federal governments across the world implementing, different types of data privacy regulation. And we're even seeing, at the state level in California with like CCPA, for example, down to that level. So it's very important at the same time to sort of understand where your data activities are ongoing and taking place. And if you're analyzing sensitive data, for example, with somebody who's located in the EU versus somebody who's located in North America, understanding international territory is going to be important when you're evaluating different privacy regulations and the level of adherence that you need to consider.
Thank you. Brett, Dr. Kleinow, anything to add to that?
No, I think you hit it on the head. I would basically just say that the better connection and collaboration you have between the security teams and the data privacy teams, the more likely you'll have a better picture of what you need to do from a security standpoint in order to be compliant. So, it's sometimes looked at from just a security standpoint or just from a privacy standpoint. But there's a tremendous amount of intersection and overlap between those two areas. And the technologies that address the needs of one often address the needs of the other as well. So having a unified strategy comes together when you have those teams working together and communicating and collaborating. So not just focusing on building a data catalog and understanding how to comply with GDPR or CCPA or something like that, but also knowing, from a governance standpoint and a security standpoint, what it is you need to do and having those teams talking. That tends to be the most, I would say, sophisticated or evolved way of addressing these needs and coming up with a unified strategy that we can help customers employ.
And Brett, just one more thing to add. One thing I want to emphasize is data privacy is constantly growing and it's constantly evolving. It's not a static evaluation; it's a dynamic evaluation. For example, in the EU, GDPR was finally implemented in the past few years, but With the recent Schrems 2 ruling, we see, more of like an enforcement offshoot of that legislation. So whether or not a data privacy regulation applies today, it doesn't mean that it might not apply tomorrow. So it's important to continuously sort of evaluate from the macro level of where your organization is operating, but also, as Brett sort of highlighted, different teams have different initiatives. So it's important to understand those ongoing initiatives as a reevaluation aspect as well.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. I have one more question here, and it's a matter of opinion. So some internal stakeholders disagree with your slide and say traditional IT security or perimeter security is sufficient. How can I help them see otherwise?
Yeah, it's the good enough approaches. I don't know if Dr. Kleinow, you want to comment?
Yeah, so for years we've been building moats around our organizations, and we see that people are still getting in. So it's not a matter of if they get in, it's when they get in. So a data protection strategy using tokenization or encryption actually allows you to render that data useless. So should that data be exfiltrated, then you have a lock sure guarantee that no one's going to be able to use that data against you. So really the traditional approaches have proven to people have been getting through, people have been getting, and we think we're taking all the right steps with traditional encryption, but when you peel back the covers, you realize that in a lot of those areas, your dev environments, your QA environments, they are not being encrypted. So that data's in the clear. So that's another area of breach. So with a strategic enterprise data security approach using tokenization and encryption, as well as data masking techniques, really renders that data useless to anyone who exfiltrates the information. And that's really the revolution that we see going on.
Yeah, and Kyla, to Dr. Kleinow's point, some of the hesitancy that we see in our customer conversations sort of impact around current configurations of data environments and tools. So for anybody that caught the piece or the explanation around the transparent integration approach, oftentimes it's a zero or minimal impact to those customer configurations. So oftentimes we see that as the worry around shifting from perimeter security to data security, but there is a way to do it without completely rearranging the hard work that a lot of IT teams have done to get a lot of applications and third-party tools integrated into their systems.
And one final thing I'll add is a lot of teams, when they're securing aggregated data, large data sets in repositories, cloud repositories, Snowflakes, Redshift, and so on. Essentially, we see a lot of organizations saying, "Well, I'm protecting the data at rest. That's good enough. That satisfies what we have to do." But what they don't realize is that the moment that server or that system coughs up that data as in response to a data request, a query, what have you, that data is automatically in the clear. And it's only protected beyond that if it enters a TLS tunnel or some other encrypted communication channel, and even then pops out the other end in the clear as well. So there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for that data to be in the clear and to be compromised in that way. And so and there's even some technologies that are specific to one data technology or database technology or another, and they'll say, well, I'm doing column level encryption, and that's actually even being controlled by my database drivers and such. So I'm protecting it already, and I'll say to them that what you're really doing in those cases, first of all, it's vendor specific, right? So now you need a different strategy for every database vendor, every data technology you're using out there if you're relying on that approach. But then you're only protecting the data from your DBA if you're using a technology that is column level in that way. So a great number of the breaches and abuses that are happening are on the over-provisioning side of data access. Authorization levels that are over-provisioned on applications, on repositories and things like that. So you need a tool that can not only protect against unauthorized DBA access or system level access or cloud engineer access, but also on the application UI side, the consumption side of the data, making sure that we're limiting the authorization levels of even users that are authorized on those applications. Should it be always on or always off? Do we really need to reveal all 20 fields to those users, or do they only really need 3 of those fields in order to do their job? That's an important factor when it comes to creating a long-term strategy that's going to stand up over time and satisfy both data privacy requirements and the security requirements of the business.
Great. Thank you, guys. I really like that analogy of the moat. No matter how many alligators and fireballs you send in there, people are still going to find a way. So it's more about reimagining the design. So thank you, guys. We're all out of time. Dr. Kleinow, thank you so much for your presentation. And Brett and Samuel, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.